Welcome to SenioRx Radio, part of the Pharmacy Podcast Network. SenioRx Radio is brought to you by the American Society of Consultant Pharmacists, the ASCP. ASCP is devoted to optimal medication management and improved healthcare outcomes for older adults. Learn more at our website, ascp.com.
Welcome to SenioRx Radio, brought to you by the American Society of Consultant Pharmacists. We have a great topic to discuss today as the seasonal calendar moves from that summer to fall, and there's kind of a rhythm in my mind. It looks like education, restarting education as part of that transition. And I know many of us don't have that traditional going back to class, going back to school track. I think it's a great time we can talk about education as it pertains to career development. And as senior care pharmacist, obtaining your board certification in geriatrics is really, in my mind, the top of that list. Today, I have the distinct pleasure of bringing on a guest who has been at the forefront of this BCGP exam, Tom Clark, Senior Director of Special Projects with the Board of Pharmacy Specialists. Tom, thanks for joining us today. I'm excited to have you on. Let's kind of have you start with, you want to give a self-introduction and highlight those points in your career would be great.
Sure. Well, first of all, Justin, thank you very much for the opportunity to be on the podcast. I appreciate this chance to be with you and look forward to talking with you today. So, I first of all grew up in Southern Illinois and near Carbondale, and went to school at the University of Illinois College of Pharmacy at the Medical Center campus in Chicago, and started out my career in hospital pharmacy primarily. Got involved in long-term care pharmacy around 1989, became a vice president of consulting for a large long-term care pharmacy company, and then moved to the Washington, D.C. area to work for the American Society of Consultant Pharmacists in 1994. So I was on staff with ASCP for quite a long time. I started out as Director of Education and Professional Affairs. And after a couple of years, we hired another pharmacist to handle education, and then I focused on professional affairs issues, particularly state operations manual, regulatory issues, and practice-related issues, and then moved to become a Director of Policy and Advocacy. So I added lobbying and legislative issues right about the time the Medicare Part D drug benefit was passed by Congress. So I was involved in implementation of the Medicare drug benefit, especially on the long-term care side of things, which was a challenge since there wasn't much in the way of legislation in that. So we worked with CMS to get that implemented in long-term care. So I did that for several years, and then moved to Director of Clinical Affairs, working initially for the ASCP Foundation, and then the Foundation and ASCP, and then moved to the Commission for Certification in Geriatric Pharmacy as Executive Director. So we of course, offered the BCGP credential through CCGP.
Yeah, I think that's a great place for us to start, is this talk about the BCGP. So if for someone that's not involved in the geriatric pharmacy world, can you kind of talk to us, what is the BCGP and what does it mean for someone, that would have those credentials as part of their name?
Right. Well, BCGP is the Board Certified Geriatric Pharmacist credential. And of course, it started out as the CGP credential initially, the Certified Geriatric Pharmacist. And that's what CCGP offered. And the credential it's basically a board certification in geriatric pharmacy. So it involves passing a multiple choice examination to become board certified. And becoming board certified is a way to demonstrate that a pharmacist has knowledge and skills and expertise in geriatric pharmacy practice. So it's showing that you have above and beyond basic licensure, that you have specialized knowledge and expertise in geriatric pharmacy practice. And it's not specific to long-term care or state operations manual issues or nursing home consulting, but it's basically geriatric pharmacotherapy. So it's geriatric pharmacy that could be as it's practiced in not only nursing home, but hospital, community pharmacy, ambulatory care. It really is not specific to any particular practice setting, but it's basically the care of older adults. And it can be really in any practice setting. So it's a very flexible credential in that respect.
No, I think that's great to hear, because I think when we often think about what a board certification geriatric pharmacist, I think our mind automatically goes to nursing homes and that work there. And certainly that dynamic of long-term care is evolving. But I'm glad you mentioned the other practices as well, because, if pharmacists are touched as part of their regular day, a geriatric patient, this certification can really go a long ways into making and providing that specialized care and demonstrating, that expertise that pharmacist has. So I'm glad you mentioned that. Curious, kind of how long has board certification been around in geriatrics?
Well, it's a good question. It's actually a tribute to the late Tim Webster, the former executive director of ASCP, that he was the visionary who began to realize that baby boomers were eventually going to start turning 65. And he knew that as an organization focused on long-term care, that most of ASCP members' patients were geriatric, and he began to see that geriatrics would be a logical extension of ASCP's focus. And so he is the one who developed a vision for geriatric board certification and began talking with the ASCP board of directors. And the board of directors of ASCP agreed and decided to implement a board certification program in geriatrics. So back in the mid-90s, the first examination for geriatric board certification was given in November of 1997, and that was the first examination. So it really was a vision of ASCP, and they created the Commission for Certification in Geriatric Pharmacy to oversee the examination and gave CCGP an identity as a separate 501c6 organization, a separate nonprofit entity to oversee the examination and the whole process, so that there would be a separate entity to handle the examination.
I was curious, 1997, not significantly long ago. I'm sure for some people it's probably longer than others as they listen to this podcast here, but talk about us a little to the launch, since you're involved or around at least part of that time. What did it look like as you started to introduce this certification geriatrics to, sort of the pharmacy public?
Mm-hmm. Well, there was a lot of excitement around the launch of the geriatric program. We had a lot of pioneers in pharmacy, some real innovators who took the first examination back in the fall of 97, as well as in 98. Initially, the exam was given in conjunction with the ASCP annual and mid-year meetings. So we had the exam given at the mid-year meeting in 98, and then, of course, in the annual meeting in 98, and so on. So initially, for a number of years, the exam was a paper and pencil exam that was given twice a year in the spring and fall, until it went to a computer-based exam later on. But it was an exciting time, and ASCP did eventually develop materials to help people prepare. I think for the initial people who took it, they didn't really have a whole lot of materials ready for those initial pioneers, but ASCP did have some materials ready later on, and the program did catch on and had some slow but steady growth over the years.
So tell me a little bit then, Tom, about your executive directorship and your involvement as you sort of grew this examination.
Well, I became executive director in 2010, initially half-time executive director, and then half-time I was working with ASCP as a director of clinical affairs. And so I was doing, trying to juggle two jobs there. And then until April of 2012, when it really got to be where both jobs were kind of requiring full-time work. So we split it out, and I became full-time executive director of CCGP in about April of 2012. So since then, I was full-time with CCGP. So what we had to do a number of things really once I got involved, because there had not really been opportunity for a lot of staff support immediately prior to my involvement. And so the website had been, kind of needed some attention and needed some upgrading. So there were some other issues that, needed to have some work done. So there was kind of a to-do list, by the time I got involved in it. And there were some things that needed to be developed. So one of the things that happened was that BPS had recently become accredited by the National Commission for Certifying Agencies, NCCA. And so there was interest for CCGP to follow suit and also become accredited by NCCA. And of course, they have accreditation standards that have to be met in order to become accredited. There's a lot of kind of hoops you have to jump through to do that. And that included some changes in bylaws that had to be made. We had to make some changes in our bylaws and some changes in our board structure, and various other things that had to be done, and a lot of policies and procedures that had to be, written and things like that. So there was just a lot of work to be done. So, I went to full-time. We applied, and we did get accredited by NCCA as BPS did. So there were a lot of things that we did. We got our website, a lot of changes made to the website, did a lot of other things to get the organization in good shape.
And I know ASCP and CCGP had a relationship, I think up to this accreditation, and certainly the relationship continues. But like you mentioned before, this accreditation isn't just about consultant pharmacists. What efforts have you made to go out kind of beyond the ASCP membership and maybe more talk to general pharmacists?
Right. Well, there's of course, ASCP created CCGP, and initially there was some structural issues with the ASCP executive director on the CCGP board and an ASCP board member on the CCGP board and so on. And those were, in order to get accredited by NCCA, one of the things that had to be done was creation of what they call kind of a firewall. We actually had to make the CCGP board more independent. And so we had to get the ASCP executive director off the board, and the ASCP board member had to become a non-voting kind of liaison member. And that's similar to the BPS structure. BPS, of course, is not actually a separate organization. It's actually part of APHA, but they do have a separate board, and they do have a non-voting APHA board member on the BPS board. So we kind of followed the BPS model in terms of our structure, and that met the NCCA standards. So that was one of the changes. But what we did, or one of the things that I did when I became executive director, was I started trying to expand our outreach of our, for our program, to seek geriatric pharmacists beyond just ASCP membership. And we started doing exhibits at the ASHP mid-year clinical meeting, and at the American Pharmacist Association annual meeting, and the American Association of Colleges of Pharmacy annual meeting. They actually have a geriatric special interest group at AACP. And so we started working with them. So we started doing some things to try to reach out to other organizations. I went to the ACCP meetings. They don't have an exhibit program, but I attended that meeting, and I went to their geriatric special interest group. That's the American College of Clinical Pharmacy. So I began collaborating with, a lot of pharmacy associations, trying to, reach out to other groups to increase our visibility and awareness with other pharmacy groups, and to try to seek geriatric pharmacists from a variety of other practice settings and other organizations, to make our organization more visible. So that was one of the things we tried to do. Not that we were trying to de-emphasize our relationship with ASCP. I mean, that was certainly still very important. But we just wanted to, as I say, we just wanted to try to grow CCGP and increase the size of the organization and get more pharmacists involved in geriatrics.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, for those of us who have that certification, I think there is the kind of a sense of strength in numbers, if you will. So it's not just one society's credential, if you will. I mean, the more people that are involved in varying markets or varying places of practice, I think it just provides that much more emphasis and kind of hat hanging, if you will, on that certification as being a really important one to have. So kind of as a result of those outreach programs, did you see a lot of significant changes?
We did see a lot of growth. We actually almost doubled the size of the program. When I became executive director in 2010, we had about 1,500 certified geriatric pharmacists. And by 2015, we had almost 3,000. So we had we experienced quite a bit of growth in about 5 years or so. We almost doubled the size of the program. So now some of that was because the job market for pharmacists was tightening. And so pharmacists were beginning to look at credentials as a way to differentiate themselves in the job market. They were looking for ways to, get a better edge in the job market. So it wasn't just, and in fact, BPS was also experiencing a lot of growth at the same time. So it wasn't just us. But I think those marketing efforts certainly contributed to the growth, and people, were certainly more aware of our program, and it certainly helped. As people were looking for credentials, our being visible and being out there certainly helped us in terms of our growth as well. So yeah, I think it was very successful and very helpful to be out there.
So we all know pretty recently, or maybe not everybody knows here because it has been a little bit of some time passed between, but beginning in 2017, CCGP merged with BPS. So tell us kind of how did that come about? How to kind of walk us through that process. I think a lot of us are curious of how that change was made.
Sure. Yeah. I think there is a lot of interest in that. Of course, we have an annual CCGP, or used to have an annual CCGP breakfast, and we're going to have that again this year at the ASCP. And I bring this up because we went through all these details last in 2016. And 2017, we at our annual breakfast meeting at the ASCP annual meeting, we have a BCGP breakfast at the ASCP annual meeting. We'll have one again this year, and we went through all this with slides and a presentation to our BCGPs at the meeting. But briefly, what we found, well, in 2016. As I said, we had so much growth. One of the challenges we had as an organization is we had been, such a small organization for such a long time that the growth began to create some problems for us. And in some ways, we were kind of a victim of our own success because we had started outgrowing our infrastructure. The software that we were using, our database for tracking our geriatric pharmacist was not really designed as a certification software. We were, kind of adapting another software that it kind of worked for us when we were smaller, but as we were getting larger, we began to realize, as with the growth that we had experienced and with the growth we were anticipating in the future, we had reached a point where if we were going to remain independent, we were going to need to invest in a much more expensive database program. We were going to need to upgrade our website because there were more expectations around privacy and security, and especially doing online transactions. There were some more standards that were coming out. And then at the same time, NCCA, we were accredited by them, but they were starting to raise the bar on their accreditation standards, and there were more expectations around accredited organizations. And so we were looking at, to remain independent, having to do some significant investments And at the same time, to do all that stuff, it's not like we had a pot of money in the bank. We actually had a loan that we were still paying off to ASCP. So we were in a situation where we were essentially functioning the same way BPS was. We were basically duplicating everything BPS was doing, except we had one exam, one program. They had 8 exams and 8 programs in a much, much larger organization to spread those costs over. And, so our board had to start taking a hard look at, does this make sense for us to spend a ton of money, to try to function as a single exam, small program, or does it make more sense to try to merge? So, one of the things we did was we sought input from our CGPs, and we did a Survey Monkey, and we asked them, what are your views of BPS and your views of your credential? And one of the questions we asked was, which would you prefer, instead of having the CGP credential, would you prefer to have your credential with a B in front of it, BCGP, the way the BPS credentials all start with the letter B? And we found that 2/3 of our CGPs would prefer to have BCGP instead of CGP as a credential. And we also found when we asked them, would you prefer that CGP collaborate, or CCGP, would you prefer that we collaborate with BPS and bring the CGP credential under the BPS umbrella? 2/3 of our CGPs were in favor of us doing that. So it was just very strong support for, doing a collaboration with BPS. So in view of all of those factors, the BPS Board of Commissioners felt that it was in the best interest of our certified geriatric pharmacists that we, talk to BPS about the possibility of collaborating. Basically ending up merging with them and just moving the certification in geriatrics exam under the BPS umbrella.
And by all accounts, kind of on the outside looking in anyway, I'm sure maybe you can give us some more accounts of the inside details, but, it looked like it was just a really nice way for that to occur. And I think, sort of the temperature of the CGP was just what you just mentioned there was, having that certification together. It made a lot of sense. I know one of the changes that happened was around the examination, because that's what I heard a lot about, or even did some, looking into myself. Talk to us about how the examination changed a little bit.
Sure. Well, and of course that's one of the big changes that resulted because our exams were different. Of course, all of the BPS exams, as I said, they had 8 at the time. They had 8, and now they're up to, I think, 11. But all of their exams follow the same format. All of their exams are 175 items, and they're all I won't say all, but most of their items are 4-option multiple choice. Now, BPS is starting to experiment with alternative item types. So in the future, we're going to see more items that are non-multiple choice items. And you may see some drag and drop, or you may see some matching, or you may see some items that are, different than multiple choice. Because what we find is, depending upon the subject matter, there's going to be some content that's where multiple choice may not be the best way to test knowledge. So I think in the future, you'll see some of the exams starting to incorporate some, and probably they're all going to continue to have some multiple choice, but you may see some alternative item types showing up on some of the exams in the future. So, in fact, we've already started to use some alternative item types on 1 or 2 of the exams, but you'll see more of that in the future. But in any event, as I say, right now geriatrics is still all multiple choice, and it is on the CCGP exams, it was all multiple choice. The BPS exam right now is still all multiple choice in geriatrics. But it's 175 items. Ours was 150 items. And the BPS exams, the multiple choice items are 4-option multiple choice. CCGP, we had switched. We used to use a 4-option multiple choice, and we had switched to a 3-option multiple choice at the recommendation of our test provider. So at the time of the merger, we were using a 3-option multiple choice. And the other thing was, we every 5 years, CCGP and BPS as well, we do what's called a job analysis or a role delineation study. And so that's considered good practice to evaluate the occupation or the profession that's being tested for any changes in practice. So the content map or the content outline for the examination is developed through the job analysis. And we were due to conduct a job analysis in 2017. That was the year that our regular job analysis was due to be done. And so we went ahead and did that in 2017. So in 2018, that was the year that our exam switched from the old format, the CCGP format, to the new BPS format. And so it went to the 175 item, 4-option multiple choice, and we actually implemented the new content outline in 2018. So the 2018 exam had a new content outline. So we had all those changes happening at once in 2018, whereas the 2017 exam was the same basic exam type that had been used for the previous 4 years. But 2017 was the year of the merger. That was kind of the merger year, because 2017, the beginning of 2017 is when the merger actually happened. Even though 2017 we were using the CGP exam, but it was under the BPS umbrella in 2017. So we had, and of course people knew that in 2018 we were going to be switching to the new exam. So what happened was, when we moved to BPS at the end of 2016, we had 3,189 board certified geriatric pharmacists. So roughly 3,200. We had 2,000 people who signed up to take the geriatric exam in 2017. And so we're 2,000 new applicants in 2017. And that's compared to in 2016, the year before the merger, we had 600 new applicants. So we had more than 3 times as many new applicants in 2017. So a lot of people were trying to get in under the wire, before the test changed. Taking it, they wanted to take it in 2017. So we had 1,200 people take the exam in that October, November 2017, that fall test window in 2017. 1,200 pharmacists took the geriatric exam just in that one test cycle. So by the end of 2017, at the end of the merger year, the number of board-certified geriatric pharmacists, those who passed the exam, had gone from about 3,200 at the end of 2016. We had gone up to almost 4,500 at the end of 2017. So it was 4,471. So that was about 40% growth in the number of geriatric pharmacists just in 1 year.
Wow, that's incredible. It really speaks to sort of the power of that merger coming together. So obviously exciting times around your office, I can imagine. What do you think the future looks like for the certification program going forward?
Well, clearly, I think the future is very bright for the program. Now, when you see a huge spike like that, typically what you see following the spike is a slump. Or at least a temporary slump, because obviously everybody who was even thinking about it is, trying to get in under the wire. So after and we've seen this year the number of people who have applied for the exam, and we've passed our deadline to apply for the fall exam now. So we're back down to just under the 600 mark, for 2018. So we're back down to, kind of our our pre-merger level for this year. But, we had more than 3 times as many last year. So that was to be expected, that this year would be kind of a slump year. But starting next year, I'm expecting the numbers will start climbing again, and we'll go back up, way above where we were before the merger. But certainly the future in geriatric board certification is going to be very bright, because obviously the number of baby boomers aging, the aging of the population is just projected to, continue to grow exponentially. For 2 reasons. The number of older adults is growing, and the geriatric credential is so flexible, it can be used, as I said earlier, in just about any practice setting. So unlike, for example, the ambulatory care credential is focused on one particular practice setting, or the cardiology credential is focused on one particular, disease or organ system. And if you change your focus, if you move from ambulatory care to inpatient, or if you move from cardiology to renal, that credential doesn't necessarily follow you to your new interest or your new area. But geriatrics is something that, as I say, is very flexible, and older adults are pretty much everywhere. So it's a very flexible credential, and it's one that's not likely to become obsolete, because older adults we're going to pretty much have with us for quite some time to come.
So if I am a community pharmacist right now, or a hospital pharmacist, or kind of pick your area of practice here, and I notice that a lot of my patients are that geriatric population, or I kind of think in the future that I see a lot of my patients are going to be in the geriatric population. If I want to learn more about this exam, because I'm interested in that personal growth, and I want to make myself, more marketable in the job market, if you will, where would I go to learn more, Tom?
Sure, that's a great question. I would say, as far as the exam itself goes, learning about the exam or preparing for the exam, I would highly recommend people look at a couple of things. One is the candidate guide, which is on the BPS website, and the candidate guide contains a lot of information about the exam itself, and just preparing for the exam, and the guidelines for the exam, and just general information. But for geriatrics, and really for any of the BPS exams, there are content outlines for all of the exams also on the BPS website. So if you're interested in geriatrics, look at the content outline, especially because, as I said, the content outline has changed recently. And so you want to be familiar with the new or the current content outline in order to study or to prepare for the exam. You want to be sure to look at that, and to be sure that you're familiar with the subject areas in that content outline. And then thirdly, you may want to consider a review course or a preparatory course. It's certainly not required. It's not necessary. It's really up to each individual person to evaluate their background, their needs, and what they think will be best to help them prepare based on their particular practice setting or their particular needs. And we find, or personally, I think people who have worked primarily in community pharmacy may especially benefit from a prep course, just from the perspective of getting a better understanding of like laboratory values and assessment, because in a community setting, you're not typically looking at charts, and you're not looking at lab values and that kind of thing on a regular basis. So if you haven't done that for a while, it may be helpful to do some case studies and maybe a prep course or some kind of setting where you can do that kind of thing would be helpful. So that would be something to consider.
Tom, I really appreciate your time today, and I can certainly tell you, as someone who has the credentials, and certainly being around a team of people who have also worked through that credentialing process as well, not only does it make you more of a competent pharmacist that you learn, obviously, as you prepare for the examination, but I've seen it make you people a more confident pharmacist as well. And I think that goes a lot to really providing that excellent pharmaceutical care we're all trying to, bring to our patient population. So I just really appreciate your time today. Thank you so much for joining us today. And of course, I'm going to assume BCG Breakfast, you're going to be at the annual meeting, so people can catch up with you there as well, correct?
That's correct. BPS will have an exhibit booth at the ASCP annual meeting, and I will be there, and look forward to talking to anyone. I'd be happy to answer questions anybody has. So catch me at the annual meeting, and I'll be happy to talk with anyone about the geriatric exam or any of the BPS exams.
Fantastic. Thank you so much again, Tom. This has been the SenioRx Radio, brought to you by the American Society of Consultant Pharmacists. And by the time this comes out, we'll be looking forward to seeing everyone annual meeting time. Thanks, everyone, for joining us today.
Thanks for listening to SenioRx Radio. Be sure to share this podcast with your fellow consultant pharmacists and pharmacy associates to learn more about better outcomes for older adult patients. Join us on the web at ascp.com.